Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Fearfully and Wonderfully Me podcast, a podcast designed to help you increase your influence, develop your leadership, and maximize your results. I'm kind of excited about today's podcast episode because I'm talking today about the process of progress. And to me, what really makes this exciting is number one, I think all of us realize and understand that if we want to be effective at influencing other people, if we want to be effective at leading ourselves well, which is the essence of self leadership, right? We understand that if we are going to be able to do that effectively, we've got to be able to harness what I call the process of progress because every single one of us have goals and dreams and things that we want to accomplish. And when we understand the principles that can help us do that successfully and achieve those goals and consistently work towards what it is we're working on in our goals and our dreams, then we understand how to apply those principles. And to me, that's powerful because I use the analogy, that leadership is like the language of influencing other people. And just like any other language, if you learn how to speak and communicate in that language, it's much easier to be effective at interacting with other people, right? If you move to a foreign country today, for example, you just get up and pack and move to a foreign country, and you don't learn to speak the language of that country, it's going to be really difficult to be effective at interacting with people. It's going to be really difficult to be effective at doing anything, buying groceries, getting your new house, just, getting a job, anything that you want to do. You're going to come in contact with people, and when you know how to speak the language, it's much easier to be effective at doing that. So leadership principles are the language of influence, and not just influencing other people, right? Also learning how to influence ourselves. And I think that comes down to the essence of self leadership. It's Sir Edmund Hillary who said, "It's not the mountains that I conquer, but myself." Right. And when I think of that, I bet I'm not the only one who knows that I have things that I want to do or things that I should do, and yet I still haven't done them. I bet every one of us can think of something that we know we should take action on, and we haven't done it. Or we know there's some things that we shouldn't do, and we still do them. We find ourselves not being a great steward of time or energy or something like that. And that's okay, right? None of us are perfect. But it's like Michael Josephson said, and I say over and over, my favorite quote by him is, "We don't have to be sick to get better." Right? None of us are perfect. None of us are going to get it right 100% of the time. There's nothing wrong with us, but we don't have to be sick to get better. So I really get excited when I talk about the process of progress and how that works, because it's so powerful when we understand that and we can leverage it and we can apply that intentionally. So I'm going to dig into that today. Now, I know a lot of you are listening to this podcast audio on your phone or while you're driving or something like that, but I know sometimes some of you are watching the video as well. So I'm going to share my screen and pull up an image that I created on the process of progress. Now, don't worry if you're just listening to the audio or you're driving, you're in the car, you're not where you're watching the actual video podcast on YouTube. That's okay. I'll go through and I'll just sort of explain the graph as I go so that you're not really missing out on that. But sometimes it helps, I know it helps me sometimes to actually have a good visual. So if you are watching the video, you can see I've shared my screen on this image that I've created. So for those of you who are audio listeners only, what I basically have here is a graph with two concepts. And the first one is really that y axis or the vertical axis. Over on the left hand side of the graph is intensity. And the x axis or the horizontal axis is consistency. And because the reason that I created this to begin with is consistency beats intensity every single time. But a lot of times when we have a goal we're trying to reach or something that we're trying to do or accomplish, We get all motivated and fired up and excited, and we try to just, throw all of our intensity into it, and then we get burned out. And the next day we don't feel like doing anything relative to that, or we're not able to. And I think of this in terms of fitness. Back when I was teaching group fitness, it was just a guarantee. Every single January, the gym would be flooded with new enrollments, and people would come in. They'd be all excited about new year and new goals and getting healthy, and they would just come in and they'd exercise for 3 hours, and then they'd be so sore the next day that they didn't want to come back, right? That's an example of how consistency beats intensity every time. And I use that an analogy in physical fitness because it's easy for us to understand. So if you're looking at my the image that I'm showing, you see that intensity is over on the left, and then our consistency, of course, is at the bottom, running left to right over time. So if you are not looking at the image that I'm sharing, just imagine I've got this graph up, and there are basically 4 quadrants in this graph. The lower left-hand corner is our low intensity and our low consistency. Again, using our physical fitness example, this is someone who maybe never exercises, and when they do, it's just maybe going for a walk for a few minutes, but they only do it every couple of months, right? So it's low intensity and low consistency. It's not something that they're taking action on every day. And that's kind of compared to that high intensity, low consistency example that I just shared, where someone gets fired up about a New Year's resolution to get fit. So they go to the gym and they work out as hard as they can for 3 hours, but then the next day they don't do anything. And they don't do anything the next day or the next week or the next month, right? That's high intensity, but low consistency. Well, the power in harnessing the process of progress happens when we start to have higher consistency, even if it's lower intensity. So the lower right-hand corner of the graph, or area of the graph, is our low intensity but high consistency. This is someone who maybe only spends 30 minutes a day working toward their physical fitness, but they do it every day. They're diligent about it. They're regular about it. It's just something that's built in that they're just going to do it. May not be, they're not running 8 miles in those 30 minutes, but they're very consistent, right? Low intensity, high consistency, very regular. And what we know is just working off of the way our graph works is that horizontal axis shows us that we do get more benefit from consistency over time, even if it's low intensity. Well, the magic happens at a high intensity and high consistency. And that's our upper right-hand corner of our quadrant of our graph, where at that point we're reaping incredible results very, very fast, right? High intensity, high consistency. We're working very hard and we're doing it very regularly. But I just want to encourage you, even if you're not working, 3 hours a day towards your goal, if you are working towards your goal just 30 minutes a day, but you're doing it consistently day after day after day, that is going to bring you great returns, because those returns compound over time, right? That's the power of consistency. But I think to understand the process of progress, you really have to understand what I call, you've got to work towards and past the point of no results. You've heard of the point of no return. This is completely different. The point of no results. So back to my fitness example. Again, everyone can understand and relate to it, I think. Let's say you were that person who got fired up about getting healthy. And so you go to the gym and you want to lose 10 pounds. So you go to the gym and you work hard for 3 hours, and you come home and you get on the scale and you still haven't lost any weight. And you get up the next morning and you go to the gym for 3 hours and you come home and you get on the scale and you still haven't lost any weight, right? You're making progress. There's no doubt you're working towards your goal. You're obviously with high intensity, and now a couple days in a row, so you're starting to get high frequency and consistency, but you haven't made any visible progress yet. And you have to be committed to the process of progress until you push past the point of no results. Because one day the magic is going to happen. If you are consistent and you're working on the right things in the right way consistently over time, you will make progress, even if you can't see it immediately. But you have to stay disciplined and committed to the process long enough to get to the point where you start to see some results. Now, the problem with that is most of us are incredibly impatient. We want results, and we want results like right now, right? So I'm going to just end the screen sharing here. And there again, for those of you who are audio listening, you might want to just, when you get home or get a chance, pull up the video on the YouTube channel. You can take a glance at the image if you are one of those visual learners. I know sometimes that helps. And it really is just a image that helps me understand and remind and remember to focus on the process, right? Because there again, we've got to be able to leverage the process of working towards a goal, whatever it is, right? If you want to start your own business, for example, there's a process for that, and you have to be committed and stay on track through that process, because you're not going to be able to accomplish building a successful business in a day. It's just not going to happen. You can't get healthy in a day. You can't get physically fit in a day. You cannot lose 10 pounds in a day, right? It really comes down to being intentional and dedicated and committed to the process of progress. And consistency will beat intensity hands down every single time. We just have to be committed to it. And you've probably heard me say before, there's a difference in being interested in an outcome and committed towards working towards it, right? Interested in an outcome is not enough to help us be successful. Whatever it is that we want to do, be, have, or build, being interested in a goal or a dream is not going to be enough to keep you motivated when it gets hard, when you're tired, when you don't feel like it. Because you're going to have those days. We're human. We all have those times where we're like, man, that sounded really good last week or last month when I set out to achieve this goal, but I don't feel like it today, right? We're all going to have those days. We're human, where I just don't feel like it today, or I'm busy, or I'm tired, or I'm sick. And you've got to have something to help you keep on track through those days, to push past that point of discipline, right? And just being interested isn't enough. You absolutely have to be committed to say, you know what, I'm in it for the long haul. It might take me a while, but I'm going to get there. Now, I kind of used the example of getting fit, but this really was applicable in my life over this past year. I mean, I've shared before, I've run several marathons. And, as I started running marathons a little more frequently, a little more regularly, I realized I didn't just want to run the marathon. I wanted to run it and run it a little bit faster. And then I started having a time goal for myself where I wanted to finish the marathon in a specific time. And so, I started setting goals for myself. And I think it was 2018, I first set the goal of, well, I didn't first set the goal. I first achieved the goal of finishing a marathon in under 4 hours. And actually, it wasn't quite under 4 hours. In 2018, it was 4 hours and 5 seconds. But, close enough. Like that was a pretty good effort as far as I was concerned. I was successful in reaching that goal pretty much. I can round down 5 seconds, right? Um, and that was a good goal for me. It felt so good to have worked and achieved that goal. And then I'm like, well, what's next? I looked around and I thought I can do a little bit better. So the next marathon was 6 months later, and I finished at 3 hours and 52 minutes. And again, that was a huge accomplishment to have improved that much in just 6 months. And I asked myself, I said, you know what? I bet I could do it again. Let me see if I can do better next time. And so I signed up for another marathon 6 months later, and I ran that marathon in 3 hours and 37 minutes. It was fast enough to get me qualified It was a qualifying time for the Boston Marathon, which is a little bit of a prestigious race. You can only get in if you're either a charity runner or you run a pretty fast time for a marathon. And so, wow, that was just such an accomplishment for me. It was the first time I'd ever really thought, man, I actually could try to qualify for a big race like the Boston Marathon. And I did it. And you know what? I'm the kind of person that once I set a goal and achieve something, I'm not just going to quit because I'm growth oriented. And so I looked around and I thought, you know what? I bet I can continue to improve and grow and develop in this area. And so I set my sights on another marathon. And it wasn't a personal best. That next marathon, it's been just a little over a year ago. But the conditions weren't as ideal. The course wasn't ideal. I pushed myself a little bit harder than maybe I should have at the first few miles because I was stretching, I was reaching and trying to see what I could do. So that was okay. It was a powerful learning experience, but it also brought home to me that if I wanted to continue to improve, I was going to have to do something different, right? It was obvious that if I wanted to continue to make progress toward my goal of running a marathon faster, I was going to have to do something a little bit different in my training. And so I did. That next or last fall, I should say last summer, last fall, I started thinking, well, what should I be doing differently? What can I be doing differently? I read a few books on, the process, and that meant doing some speed workouts and trying to improve my strength as a runner and doing all of that. And I will tell you that there is a difference between just getting out and going to run and getting out to run around a track and trying to run super fast sprints and doing hill repeats and all that kind of training that I'd never really done before. And I really underestimated how much effort it was going to take to get to that next level in my running. And so it was one of the toughest training seasons that I've had, but I trained harder than I ever have. And so my point in sharing that story with you, number one, this past marathon that I just finished a couple of months ago, it was far from my best, far from my best. But that's okay because I understand where I'm at in this cycle and the process of making progress. Right? A lot of times when we talk about the process of progress, we have to be committed through the sacrifices and the short term, knowing that we're working toward the long term, bigger picture. And that was me this training season, is knowing that, you know what, I did some speed work and track work. I, struggled with a lot of my workouts and finishing, and this wasn't my best marathon, but I know where I'm at in the process. And I know if I stay committed and consistent over time, I'm going to reach that second half of the graph, right? Past the point of no results. Because right now I haven't seen a whole lot of results or benefit from all that extra speed work that I did and some sprints and things like that. I haven't seen the benefit of that, right? I'm still in that high intensity but low consistency point of the process. And I know that and I realize that. Now it doesn't mean it's easy, right? It's frustrating sometimes when we're working towards something and we haven't seen the results yet. And that's where I'm at in terms of my running and my training. There's some high intensity going on. Let me tell you, there was some high intensity, but I hadn't yet been consistent enough with that to see and push past the point of no results. So I know it's coming. And when we know it's coming, sometimes that gives us a little more patience and willingness to be consistent, to stay the course, to stay motivated. And I've said this before, transformation takes time, right? We just have to be committed to the time that it takes. Pat Parelli used to say, take the time it takes so it takes less time. And I love that because he was saying, really, if you slow down enough on the front end and take the time that it takes, put the work in, make the sacrifices, keep the discipline, in the long term, it's going to take less time, right? You're going to reach your goal or achieve it, but you have to be willing to put the work in on the front end and stay committed and consistent through the process, because progress really is a process. So there you go, just a few thoughts on how we can leverage that consistency over time to really help us achieve results. But let me just encourage you, if you're going through a season where you're maybe like I am in my marathon training, you're in the early stages and you're like, man, I'm working hard on that, but I'm not seeing results. Let me just remind you that it's the power of consistency over time that's really going to exponentially help you see progress. But you have to keep pushing, you have to keep growing, you have to keep going. Until next time.